Let's talk about accessibility. This is something that is very important to design, although sometimes it's not the first thing that designers might think about. This is me asking you to remember this stuff when you're doing design. We will talk about what accessibility means to us as designers and to the users and the viewers of the things that we create. We'll also talk about the concept of contrast, which is very important in design. And then I will give you some resources for ongoing research. This is something that I urge you to continue to learn about. Okay, so what exactly is accessibility? This is really us designing things and considering people with different abilities. So not everyone has the ability to see like we do or hear like we do. So as we design things, we want to make sure that they work for the people who will be using them. If you look at people the world over, there's maybe 15% of people have some kind of a disability. And it's said that up to 17% of any population, that's 1.3 billion people, billion across the world, experience some kind of blindness or color blindness or vision impairment of some kind. That's a lot of people. Some of the tools that we see in our everyday lives are closed captioning, for example, for people with hearing impairments. There's also audio descriptors of shows that people with limited eyesight can listen to, and it can describe the show to them. There's things like screen magnifiers, things that make our screens bigger so we can see them. There are speech-to-text translators. So sometimes people are looking at a website that you designed, and they are actually hearing it spoken to them by their screen reader. There's all kinds of things like this that I just urge you to consider as you're designing. We're not going to go super deep into any of this because it's a really deep subject, but I wanted to get it on your radar. Okay? There's this concept of permanent versus temporary versus situational. Permanent is obviously somebody who has a permanent impairment, blindness, and that is their condition for the rest of their lives. Temporary is somebody maybe who's recovering from an illness, or they might have patches on their eyes that impairs their vision. And situational is more like maybe somebody is a young mother and they're carrying a baby, they're pushing a stroller and they have a shopping bag. In that situation, they are impaired in some way. So if they're trying to look at their phone, that's going to be a little bit difficult. So that's a situational impairment. Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, this was created in 1998. The original act was in 1973. But in 1998, we added things such as information technology. And what are the rules and regulations around making our digital products and our informational products accessible? Read about Section 508. We'll mention a little bit about it, but it's a deep subject. The W3C is the World Wide Web Consortium. This is the international standards organization for the World Wide Web. So if you want to know what the rules are, they're the official rule makers. The Web Accessibility Initiative brings together groups from industry and from government and from disability organizations to get together and talk about these concepts and to try to give suggestions about people with disabilities. WCAG, this is the Content Accessibility Guidelines. And so if you're making content that is going to be put onto the web, this is the rule set. So become familiar with all of these concepts, even if just in a general way. Contrast. So this is a big, important concept, and especially related to choosing colors. So legibility of the things we create is better with higher contrast. So high contrast means that say the background and the foreground are enough differentiated that there is contrast between the background and the foreground. Therefore, if the foreground is letters and the background is the color of your page, then what we're looking to do is to make sure that those letters stand out from the background so that there is contrast. So that's super, super important. Now, contrast, how do we measure that? It's high contrast, it's low contrast. We use these terms, but there is a formula, and it's represented as a ratio. So 4.5 to 1. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment and kind of see how we can measure this number. But really, we want it to be at least as good as that. If it's below that, then it might be hard to read. Might be hard to read for anyone, but it might be especially hard for someone to read with some kind of vision impairment or color blindness. In general, avoid a pure white background. So again, with contrast, if the letters are pure black and the background is pure white, that might be a little too much contrast. There might be a little bit too much light in a white background. So sometimes what we do is we do a little off white and a little off black. So the contrast is still there, but it's not shooting all that light into our eyes from the screen. Okay, so let's talk about contrast checkers. These are tools that we can use to check our contrast. And so we want to make sure it's 4.5 to 1. So let's look at some of this. Let me see. I have one around here somewhere. There we go. This is a contrast checker. This is in the links that you have. I'm going to choose here. So you can choose a color. I'm going to click here and use the color picker. Let's use a purpley for the foreground color and then some kind of a yellowish for the background color. Now, it doesn't like that at all. See, you can see down here that it is a bit difficult to read. The ratio is 2.34 to 1. Not good. So if these were your colors that you were choosing for your page, I'd say choose again. Okay, let's make this one a little darker. So it's a dark purple. And with the yellow, let's make it a little brighter. There. So it's a little closer. And it passed most of the tests. As a matter of fact, the number is above what we want it to be. But if we wanted a AAA rating, that means absolutely best contrast ever according to the WCAG, then that one would fail as well. So let's try to crank it up even a little bit more. Still a good color contrast, but not quite what we're looking for. There. Now, this passes everything because it's a 7.66 to 1. It's a really dark foreground color and a light background color. So that's what I recommend you do as you're testing your different colors. Just see, not just by your eyes, actually get a number and see how good the contrast is. Okay, for ongoing research, there's a ton you can look into. I'm going to give you a few sites and tips and hints. There's also further information and further links in the resources section, which is next. So I want in general for you to explore ways that you can help. You can make things more legible. You can make things you design more readable and more pleasant to interact with. The POUR Principles, you'll see if you look into WCAG, they have these overall principles that you as a designer should be trying to design, especially when you're choosing colors. You want it to be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. The acronym is POUR. And so think about this while you're designing. Some other related topics are inclusive design, usability, assistive technologies. Explore these different concepts. It's all related to accessibility. And in general, it's also just good business. If you make the things that you create more accessible to more people, then you'll have a bigger audience. and people will appreciate this. So have fun choosing your designs, but also keep in mind accessibility. Okay, let's move on to resources.